Well, tonight is Thursday, the 30th of May. The moon has just entered its final quarter, which is usually a very promising time for deep sky astronomy. Here's a view of our sky. Some clouds off to the east, not too bad to the south. Trees are flourishing, apple tree, pear tree, and we are now a power plant generating our own electricity. As you can see in our 3 video series that covers our experiences with the process. Once again, I am going to set up the observatory. Very straightforward operation. But tonight, we're going to try to figure out how far north we can go in terms of constellations ascending to the north and the east. Oop. It's a little challenging when I have to carry the camera with me. There we go. You can see the scope. It's nicely set in the counterweight down position. I just stepped on a goat spur. They're always fun. Okay, so first step after opening up the observatory, turn on the Gemini 2 system and then go from there. I'm going to leave off because I've got to get rid of this goat spur. It's a seed. I do not want to just toss it on the grass. This is not, this is not repeated a resynchronized view of Arcturus. It is, in fact, where the scope went after I parked it at the zenith, and it went right to it. The focus looked pretty good from the beginning. There's our view. Even though I'm in night mode, which should be black and white, we're seeing color on the screen, which kind of concerns me a little bit. So why don't we go down to return. It's in night mode with IR optimizer. Here's day mode. Here's auto mode. Haven't played with auto mode, which might be intriguing when we get into the summer season and we have nebulosity. Hopefully it will detect color when it's present, but I'm not going to do that experiment tonight. Let's switch back to night mode. Return, picture adjust. Well, I got everything set in the middling. E-zoom should be off. That's very intriguing. Let's see if I can turn it off. It should be off. Off. Wow. That could explain the imagery we've been getting. Fascinating, folks. And that does explain why galaxies have been looking bigger and fainter. Wow, tonight should be very intriguing. The last 5 or 6 videos may have had E-zoom on, which means the field of view is smaller and the brightness of galaxies was more disparately spread out, losing contrast. Nice to have caught that. Very good. All right, so there was a surprising discovery of the evening. And let's wait around for another hour to an hour and a half for sky dark after I finally synchronize the image once again. It is now about 10 minutes to 10 in the evening, not quite sky dark, but it really doesn't matter that much. When you're looking at globular clusters, you get a pretty good view. This is, of course, Messier 92. We had a view of it from the previous night. That view, however, I've now discovered was complicated by the fact we are operating at higher magnification than the 2mm exit pupil, which is kind of essential when you're doing your deepest sky studies. We're probably operating somewhere around 100 to 105x and that was spreading out the light of galaxies too much. I'm not sure how that setting came about. It's possible that I put it in when I was doing some Jupiter views several months back, but I have noticed over the last 2 weeks that I have been very dissatisfied with the views of galaxies that otherwise should give good views. And now I'm about to test that notion out with galaxies again tonight. I'm going to review a couple of galaxies from the previous night, and we're going to go on. Because the main goal for this evening that I had intended before I discovered the fact that magnification zoom was on was that I want to see how far north I can go if I track down studies that are further to the east. But tonight I was also thinking that I was going to pretty much begin looking at galaxies like NGC 6000 plus, and that would be in Corona Borealis, the crown of the north. But anyway, here we have what I consider to be a fairly decent view of Messier 92 to kick off the evening with. And as it gets a little darker, we're going to go revisit a fainter NGC globular cluster in Boötes. So here's our view of NGC 5466. Doesn't seem particularly better than it was the night before, but then again we're dealing with stars here, not nebulosities. We're not quite at 10 o'clock, so I'm not really getting a sense that it's sky dark, but you know what? The scope is pretty much culminating at this point, so the sky up there is pretty faint. With luminosity. So NGC 5466 is a globular cluster in Boötes, magnitude 9.1, about 9 arc minutes in size, and the brightest stars are magnitude 13.8. It's a class 12, which means the most extreme version of a globular cluster in terms of how broadly spaced the stellar components are. The cluster is 5,400 light years distant. And in putting my notes together today, I discovered that this particular galaxy is a good one for analyzing starlight, metallicity, etc., and the spread of the spectrum, the various deltas that exist between the visual and the blue-violet, because it's well away from the galactic plane, which means there's less nebulosity reddening the quality of the light coming from the cluster. I do believe the view we are getting tonight is better. It certainly is more aesthetically pleasing. So with this, I am now about to revisit that 14th magnitude edge-on galaxy that we imaged last night, NGC 5730, and that'll give us a good sense of whether or not reducing the magnification by about 50% is really going to contribute to condensing light from nebulosity, making its boundaries much clearer to perception rather than just fading off without giving a sense of definition in the borders of the galaxies. So let's go ahead and take a look at that galaxy next. So here's tonight's view of this pair of galaxies with NGC 5730 being the one that's located right about here, our edge-on galaxy, and its neighbor there. So I will post up a screen print of the pair of galaxies so we can compare them at the two different magnifications. I do believe we're getting a finer sense of the frontier of both galaxies at the lower magnification, which is what I expect. Also, we're seeing more stars in the field, and I think that was a problem with the higher magnification as well. there are a lot of artifacts on the screen, and those get to be annoying if there aren't some bright stars also visible on the screen in terms of the pure aesthetics. So I think what we've got here is a very nice view. I'll give you the data one more time. And then we will move on to the studies of the evening in Corona Borealis. I noticed in the Wiltirian Star Guide Sky Atlas there were no brightish galaxies whatsoever in the northern crown, but I did find quite a few galaxies, fainter ones, in the database on the skylive.com. And so we're going to start with NGC 6000 at that point, which will be further to the east. Also, hopefully, we'll be able to go further north than we are right now at plus 42 degrees and 44 minutes. NGC 5730, Galaxy in Boötes, magnitude 14.1, 1.8 by 0.4 arc minute irregular, 118 million light years distant. We are at right ascension 14 hour, 39 minutes, 52 seconds, and declination 42, 44, 31. And I do believe these views are superior to the ones of the previous evening, even though the skies are quite comparable in terms of clarity, transparency, and darkness. NGC 6001, the galaxy in Corona Borealis, the northern crown. Magnitude 14.5, strict 1 by 1 face-on spiral of the class C, so pretty immature galaxy, but remarkably 446 million light years distant. This is a galaxy that's about as large as Messier 31, is a little less well developed, but what you can see here in the middle of the screen is it has a substantial core presence, plus an aura of nebulosity around it. Not bad for a magnitude 14.5 galaxy. We're at right ascension 15, 47, 45, declination 28, 38, 29, and we will try to stick pretty much with galaxies and any other studies that come up in Corona Borealis for the evening. The least little stepper click from NGC 6001 is NGC 6002. I do believe we're seeing it on the screen. Now, see if it makes sense that it's right about in that location, very close to NGC 6001. The reason why we might question it is because this is a 17th magnitude galaxy, but it is 0.2 by 0.1 arc minutes, so it's highly condensed. It probably has an average surface brightness, maybe 22.5, but I do believe we are seeing the galaxy right about in the position that 6001 was after a few stepper clicks. This would make the faintest galaxy image thus far at magnitude 17, because I usually draw the limit at about magnitude 16.5. So hurrah for that, if confirmed. Corona Borealis is a fairly small constellation, so I skipped over quite a few in Serpens and one in Hercules to arrive at NGC 6016. Galaxy in Corona Borealis, magnitude 14.3, a perfect 2-to-1 ratio galaxy, 1 by 0.5 arc minutes, spiral with a bar and a lowercase c, 296 million light years distant, puts it a little smaller than our own Milky Way. We're at almost 27 degrees north declination. The galaxy is quite present right in the middle of the screen at magnitude 14.3. Not a spectacular look, but quite present, so we can be happy with that. And notice we're starting to get some star fields, which really enhance the aesthetics of looking at these galaxies. So NGC 6016. Let's go on with more in Corona Borealis if they're in the catalog. Well, it had to do a lot of hopping around our galaxies in Serpens and Hercules and Draco, even one in Ursa Minoris, to get to NGC 6038, galaxy, our next one in Corona Borealis. Galaxy is magnitude 13.5, 1.1 by 1.1 arc-minute face-on spiral with a lowercase c. Must be quite large, and you would expect that it is. It's probably about 140,000 light years in diameter to be seen at that distance, especially being a thrice removed galaxy from the lenticular class. We're at right ascension now, 16 hours, 2 minutes, and 40 seconds with a declination of 37:21:32. The galaxy is visible, but I think that may be an artifact. It's right in the middle of its nebulosity. Once again, a lot of skipping over galaxies in Serpens and Hercules to get to NGC 6069, a galaxy in Corona Borealis. Magnitude 15.5, but almost 1 by 1 arc-minutes, 0.9 by 0.9. It's a lenticular spiral, 512 million light years distant. We're at almost 39 degrees in declination. At 512 million light years distant, this galaxy is perhaps slightly larger than Messier 31. And it's quite present on the screen. At least its core is visible with a faint amount of shading going off to all directions. Plus an excellent star field. That's a good look, aesthetically. Let's have a look at NGC 6076. Galaxy in Corona Borealis, magnitude 15.4, but smallish, 0.4 by 0.4 arc-minutes. It's an elliptical. Looks like it's in a rich galaxy field. 447 million light years distant, puts it at probably somewhere around 70,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 26, almost 27 degrees in northern declination, and galaxy is probably right where they've been turning up, right there, but it has a lot of confreres. I'm not sure, it probably has a designation as a galaxy group, probably not line of sight. Just something about it that looks to constellate. So maybe there'll be some information available online. You may want to do some research on your own. NGC, galaxy group that NGC 6076 may be a member of, almost a 500 million light years distant. Well, it wasn't much of a leap to get to NGC 6077, which may be a member of that group. We're going to want to pay attention to its distance. Galaxy Corona Borealis, brighter than the last one, 13.3, 1.2 by 1.1 arc-minutes, elliptical, and 428 million light years distant. So we are reinforcing this idea. I suspect it's this galaxy right here, magnitude 13.3. We're almost at 27 degrees in declination. Our previous 6076, I believe, is probably off to the side over, perhaps that one there, because it was kind of a face-on, as I recall. Anyway, so there is our view to be compared on the manana to see which way the screen shifted. I don't quite recall it. I'll have to look at both images. Anyway, NGC 6077 in Corona Borealis as we continue to explore the Northern Crown. Before us now is perhaps the brightest galaxy we've encountered in the Corona Borealis, NGC 6085. Magnitude 13, 1.5 by 1.2 arc-minutes, spiral with a lowercase a, so once removed from lenticular class, distant like the others, 471 million light years, but further to the south by about a 0.5 degree, plus 29 and 21 minutes. Galaxy is quite present on the screen. Bright core with some nebulosity fading off in the distance. Many stars present as well, a reasonable number of stars, plus a lot of artifacts that somehow there just ain't no way to get rid of them. I'm also noticing a number of galaxies off here in a linear fashion, there may be several there as well. So a galaxy group once again, probably. Not too far from the last galaxy, I believe the screen hopped down a little bit, is NGC 6086, Galaxy Corona Borealis. This is brighter than the last, magnitude 12.8, but not by much. 1.7 by 1.2 arc minute, elliptical class 2, 426 million light years distant. We made a little bit of a jump going north. So now 29 degrees, 29 minutes, and 5 seconds. So there's a decent view of it, the brightest galaxy yet in Corona Borealis. I'll allow you to continue to contemplate it. We found a 15th magnitude galaxy, NGC 6089. Let's take a hop to that. NGC 6089 is a bit more distant, further north, plus 33 degrees. So we've hopped about 4 degrees to go north to Galaxy 6089 in Corona Borealis. Faint, magnitude 15, but smallish, 0.6 by 0.6, face-on spiral, the lowercase a. 439 million light years distant. I think it's quite obvious on the screen right about there. Probably all these galaxies are falling in about the same distance, but they're, if they're not within a couple of 5 or 10 arc minutes of each other, it's unlikely they're sharing the same galactic space. I do believe we just had a satellite passage. There's no thready trail behind it, so that was a satellite passage. And there's our look at NGC 6089. Now we've dropped about 6 degrees, 5 to 6 degrees further south to NGC 6092. Another galaxy in Corona Borealis. That's where I'm going to pretty much stick this evening. Magnitude 14.1, 1.3 by 1 arc minute, elliptical, 435 million light years distant. We sure are seeing a lot of those. It's at plus 28 degrees in declination, and we're getting a pretty good view right in the middle of the screen. Hardly a tick on this one to NGC 6096 in Corona Borealis, galaxy magnitude 14.2, 2-to-1 aspect ratio, 0.9 by 0.4 arc minutes, spiral with a lowercase b, you can see it at the middle of the screen, 438 million light years distant. We're at plus 26.5 degrees in declination. NGC 6097, another galaxy in Corona Borealis, about the same distance, 445 million light years, magnitude 15, about 1.1 by 0.6 arc minutes, so roughly the same size as Messier 31. However, at this distance, Messier 31 would be about magnitude 14.5, so this galaxy doesn't quite have the same level of luminosity. We're at plus 35 degrees in declination this time, so we're well away from those other groups, that other group that we saw earlier. So okay, our observing list is getting a little long for tonight, so I'm going to make this the last galaxy study for this evening. NGC 6102, galaxy in Corona Borealis, magnitude 13.8, 1.2 by 0.8 arc minute, football-shaped spiral with a lowercase c. This galaxy is closer, 336 million light years distant. We're at plus 28 degrees, 9 minutes, 30 seconds, right ascension 1536. And let's go out in another globular cluster. Okay, what you're seeing here is the 6-inch equivalent view of Messier 13. Thought you might like to see it step up through the various ratings. I typically consider shutter speed of 16 flood to be a 6-inch. Going to 32 now makes it about a 9-inch view. We'll give it a chance to develop. Going to 64 flood gives you about a 12-inch view of it. Now we're not getting the resolution, nor are we getting a nice dark flat field like you would expect at the eyepiece, but we are collecting a lot of photons. And then finally up to our standard rating of 128 flood. It's takes about 40 seconds to get the final view after 6 image stacks that basically reduce the background light to give you better contrast. And this is the equivalent of roughly a 22 to 24 inch view of Messier 13. I have seen it at the eyepiece of a 30-inch telescope. Looks quite comparable, except the stars are much tighter. We're probably getting about 2 arc seconds to do 2.5 arc seconds resolution at this particular magnification with this screen resolution that is used in the TFT monitor. However, light does tend to get smeared about quite a bit, so we're not getting the nice sharp stars we might otherwise expect. So I'm going to back out of this now, returning us. So we can get the entire screen view of Messier 13. Probably the finest globular cluster visible north of the celestial equator. Messier 5 is also quite good, and not quite as bright as Messier 22, but that lies further south in Sagittarius. So there's a nice barn-burning view of Messier 13. And with this, I'm going to say, Carpe Nocte.